My grandparents own a cozy little country house up in Vermont, and I used to visit them as often as I could. The drive wasn't too long, so it never felt like a hassle. Coming from a densely populated area, it took me a while to adjust to the stillness and quiet of Vermont. But over time, I came to enjoy the peaceful scenery on the way there. When I arrived, my grandfather was sitting out on the balcony with a glass of whiskey in hand, waiting for me like always. He waved as I pulled up, and I greeted both my grandparents with a big hug, just like I always did. Since I got there early, my grandfather and I decided to take a walk on the trail we always used to explore. It runs through a patch of woods right next to the house. My grandmother stayed behind to cook, wanting dinner ready by the time we got back. As we walked, we talked about life, work, and everything in between. We returned just in time. The food was still hot on the table. After eating, my grandfather and I sat out on the balcony, just enjoying the evening air and continuing our conversation. I can't remember what we were talking about, but I distinctly remember stopping mid-sentence when I noticed something in the tree line. It sounds bizarre, I know, but I saw this tall, skinny, pinkish creature running on 4 legs just past the edge of the woods. The fog partially obscured it, but I saw it clearly enough to know it wasn't any animal I recognized. I leaned forward, squinting, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. "You okay?" my grandfather asked. "Yeah," I replied, still staring into the trees. But whatever it was had vanished, moving at an incredible speed. I eventually dismissed it, thinking the fog had played tricks on my eyes. That night I went to bed and fell asleep quickly. I'm normally a heavy sleeper and rarely wake up in the middle of the night. But something woke me up. I didn't feel alarmed at first, just confused. I brushed it off and shut my eyes again. That's when I heard it, a horrifying, demonic scream echoing from the distance. I can't even begin to describe the sound. It was like pure nightmare fuel, and it lasted about 10 seconds before everything fell deathly silent again. I noticed the light under my door flicker on, meaning my grandparents had woken up too. We met in the hallway, all equally clueless and disturbed. Eventually we went back to bed, but I struggled to fall asleep. That scream, it had truly shaken me. The next morning, we briefly talked about it over breakfast. My grandmother thought it might have been a group of foxes, but my grandfather didn't seem convinced. He hinted that it could have been something else. I, on the other hand, had no idea what it was. The day went on like normal. I went biking near a scenic lake, enjoyed the fresh air, and by then I had pretty much forgotten about the scream and the strange figure in the woods. That night, however, something happened that I still can't explain. I wasn't asleep yet. I was lying in bed, texting some friends and listening to music with my AirPods in. Everything was fine, until I heard that same blood-curdling scream again. It sounded even louder than before, and I had my AirPods in. I froze. Once the scream stopped, curiosity got the better of me. I needed to know what was out there. I stood up, walked over to my window, and pulled the curtain aside. The moonlight made it easy to see outside. The yard was dimly lit, but clear enough. That's when I saw something. At first, I thought it was that same strange creature from the woods, but as I squinted, I realized it was my grandfather. He was just standing there, completely still, staring into the trees. I called his name, but he didn't respond. Figuring he couldn't hear me, I rushed downstairs and ran outside to him. When I reached him, I realized something was very wrong. He was in a trance-like state, totally unresponsive. His eyes were half closed, and he didn't even flinch when I shook his arm. Finally, after a few shakes, he blinked and seemed to snap out of it, as if waking up while standing. I reassured him and gently guided him back into the house. He went straight to bed and fell asleep almost instantly. The next morning, I asked him what had happened. He looked at me confused and said he didn't remember a thing. That gave me chills. I let it go after that. Maybe I was overthinking everything. The creature in the woods, the scream, my grandfather's trance. But it's hard not to wonder what really happened. To my knowledge, my grandparents have never sleepwalked, and neither have I. It's just strange how it all unfolded. The sightings, the sounds, the unexplainable behavior. Maybe I'm overcomplicating it, maybe not, but to this day, I still don't have an explanation, and I'm not sure I ever will. Almost a year ago, I worked as an opener at a resort, clocking in just before 5 a.m. every day. The resort was tucked away inside a wealthy neighborhood way out in the country. Employees were required to park in one of two lots at opposite ends of the property. I usually chose the lot that sat next to a long road leading deeper into the neighborhood. A short stretch of brush and trees separated the resort from that road. No one ever walked through it. That morning felt like any other. I pulled into the parking lot and put the car in park, my headlights still on. The lot was pitch dark, as the overhead lights never turned on that early, probably because I was usually one of the first people to arrive, well before the sun came up and before anyone else showed up for their shift. I had my hand on my keys, just about to turn the car off when I saw something that made my stomach drop. A girl, maybe 14 or 15, suddenly emerged from the trees directly in front of my car. My headlights lit her up clearly in the darkness. She looked like a typical high schooler with long blonde hair, wearing a jacket and pajama pants, like she had just walked out of her house half asleep. But something about her felt wrong. She was laughing and smiling, completely by herself. I couldn't hear her from inside the car, but visually, she was giggling at something I couldn't see. It didn't look playful, it looked unnatural. Occasionally, she would glance over her shoulder, as if someone else was nearby, just beyond the reach of my headlights. Then, without warning, she looked right at me and waved like it was the most normal thing in the world, at 5 a.m., in total darkness, in the middle of nowhere. Immediately after waving, she sprinted toward my passenger door. Everything happened so fast. My brain hadn't caught up yet. I yanked the aux cord from my phone to silence whatever song was playing and scrambled to hit the lock button. I remember panicking because I couldn't remember if it was up or down to lock it, but thankfully, because I hadn't turned the car off, it was still locked. She started yanking on the door handle, hard, repeatedly. Then she began pounding on the window, still smiling, as if this were all some kind of twisted game. I screamed at her to leave, slamming my hand on the horn, hoping to scare her off, but she didn't flinch. She just kept laughing, like I was a friend jokingly refusing to let her in. After a few seconds, she suddenly stopped. Her face changed. The smile vanished, replaced with a look of disappointment, like I'd let her down. Then, without another word, she turned and calmly walked away, disappearing back into the trees from where she came. Before vanishing into the brush, she waved at me one last time. I sat there in shock, trying to process what just happened. When I got to work, I told someone about it, but they brushed it off like it was nothing. I never reported it to the police, and I still regret that. Everyone I've shared the story with chalks it up to drugs or mental illness, but something about that encounter didn't sit right with me. Her behavior didn't feel drug-induced, it felt calculated, detached. My first thought was maybe human trafficking. I'm not well versed in the subject, but something about how she glanced behind her, how she acted like someone else might be watching, really unsettled me. To this day, I can't shake the feeling that someone else was there, watching, waiting, and I'll probably never know where they were, or what they were planning. After the divorce, I didn't want to be around anyone. For 6 months I drifted, crashing in my brother's guest room, rotating through friends' couches, and spending way too much money on extended stay motels. None of it felt like a place I could be. I was a ghost of myself, floating from one borrowed space to the next, too drained to explain how I was doing, too raw to pretend I was okay. Then I remembered the old farmhouse my uncle left behind, 15 acres outside Franklin, Tennessee, untouched, unclaimed. My uncle never had kids, and my dad never wanted anything to do with the place. After the funeral, the house just sat there, waiting, like it knew someone would eventually come back. I wasn't looking for comfort, or for people, or healing. I just wanted quiet, solitude, maybe even a place where I could fall apart in peace. So I took an extended leave from the department, packed up my truck with the basics, clothes, tools, a coffee maker, a few books I wouldn't read, and drove south. No real plan, just a hope that maybe space would help me remember who I was. When I arrived, the place was wild, Kudzu blanketed the fence line. Weeds had all but swallowed the gravel driveway. The mailbox leaned at an angle, like it had given up long ago, but the house, weathered, 2 stories tall with a wraparound porch, was still standing, stubborn. The wood floors groaned underfoot like an old man getting out of a chair, but the bones were solid. Inside, the air was thick with dust and cedar. Wallpaper peeled in long curls down the hallway, and spiders had claimed the kitchen ceiling. But it was quiet, still, and that stillness was exactly what I needed. I remember standing in the middle of the living room that first night, just breathing it in. There was a weight to the house, not heavy, just present, like it remembered things, even if I didn't. It was cold in the corners, even with the heat on. I made instant coffee, sat on the floor with my back to the wall, and let the silence wrap around me like a threadbare blanket. No one was trying to fix me. No advice, no sideways glances. Just quiet. I settled into a rhythm, chopped wood, cooked simple meals, read when I could focus, slept when I couldn't help it. I patched windows, restained the porch, cleared brush behind the house. I spent hours walking the property, letting old childhood memories flicker back. Summer weekends, my uncle spinning stories on the porch, while the adults talked hunting seasons and weather. Half his tales were probably made up, but I clung to them now like rope. I've seen things, house fires, wrecks, people broken in ways bones can't show. I've carried bodies, delivered death notices. After a while, you stop letting the dark scare you, so when I first started hearing noises upstairs at night, I didn't panic. I figured it was the house settling, old wood shifting, temperature changes making things creak and sigh. That house had a voice. It clicked and whispered like it was talking to itself. But after the second week, the sounds got more specific. Footsteps, slow, deliberate pacing between 2 and 4 a.m. Then a pause, then more pacing. Once, I heard something that sounded like dragging, a single, heavy scrape across the floorboards. I checked it out the next morning, flashlight in hand. Thought maybe a raccoon got in, but nothing, just 2 dusty bedrooms and a hallway with curling wallpaper. One door didn't latch right, so I wedged it shut with a towel. That night I heard it creak open again, just a few inches, like something had peeked out and changed its mind. After that, checking the doors upstairs became part of my routine. Closet closed, guest room door shut. I even started taking pictures with my phone, just to reassure myself. But every morning, one door would be open again. Not wide, just enough to feel wrong. I didn't tell anyone. What would I say? Hey, I think my dead uncle's house has a polite ghost. I chalked it up to stress. Divorce messes with your head. But then one morning, I walked into the kitchen and every cabinet door was wide open. Drawers too, like someone had carefully gone through every space and left everything gaping behind them. Nothing broken, nothing missing, back door locked, windows intact. That's when the unease settled in. I drove into town that afternoon and bought a deadbolt for the attic door. I hadn't been up there yet, but the way the ceiling creaked above my bed each night made me feel like maybe I wasn't the only one hearing it. I picked up some motion sensors too, cheap ones, but better than nothing. I installed the lock, started sleeping with a flashlight and a tire iron by the bed, but the noises kept coming. Footsteps, creaks, knocks. The sensors never went off. Eventually I stopped going upstairs at night. Figured if something was squatting up there, fine. Just stay upstairs. Then one morning, I found the attic lock broken. Not picked, snapped. The metal latch twisted. Screws yanked from the wood like someone had torn them out with bare hands. I hadn't heard a thing. I opened the attic door slowly, flashlight beam cutting through thick, musty air that smelled faintly of stale smoke, the kind that sinks into wood and stays there. I climbed the ladder, each step creaking loud in the quiet. 3 cigarette butts lay neatly near the window. Beside them, a folded blanket, an old water bottle, a granola bar wrapper, all arranged like someone had been living there, or planned to come back. I backed down, closed the door, stood in the hallway listening. Nothing, just the old house breathing. I checked every inch of the property, fence line, shed, the old well, the chicken coop. No prints, no tracks, no sign of forced entry. That night I barricaded myself in the bedroom, locked the door, kept the flashlight and tire iron within reach. I didn't sleep, just stared at the ceiling, waiting. Around 3:30, I heard it. A floorboard creaked above me. Then, tap. Just one. Not pacing, not dragging. Just presence. The next night, I was ready. I told myself if I heard anything, I'd call the sheriff. Pride be damned. At 2:48 a.m., movement. I crept upstairs, tire iron in hand, flashlight off. The attic door, now without a lock, stood open, wider than before. I climbed the ladder, held my breath, turned on the light. The cigarette butts were still there. So was the blanket, the bottle, and one more thing. A cigarette, still lit. The smoke hadn't even reached the ceiling. I bolted, down the ladder, through the hallway, out the front door, into the truck. My hands shook so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I pulled away, my headlight swept across the house, and I heard it, the back door, slamming shut. I didn't stop until I hit town, checked into the first motel I saw and called the sheriff. To their credit, they took it seriously, came out, took photos, gathered evidence. They found the butts, the snapped lock, no fingerprints, no sign of forced entry. Said maybe I'd scared off a drifter, someone who'd been living up there all along. I went back one last time, changed every lock, installed motion lights, nailed the attic door shut with 6-inch screws, slept with a knife under my pillow for 3 nights. On the 4th, before the sun was even up, I packed my truck and drove away. I never went back.